Hi everyone, in today's video I'm going to give a detailed explanation of the EB5 source of funds requirement, and I'm going to answer some of the most important questions regarding this requirement. So if you're considering an EB5 investor visa, make sure to stick around. Hi everyone, my name is Michael Ashoori and I'm a US immigration lawyer based in Los Angeles, California. At my law firm, we regularly post videos to make sure that you're up to date with the latest immigration news and tips. So if you haven't yet subscribed to our YouTube channel, make sure to hit the subscribe button now. Also, please make sure to give this video a big thumbs up so that YouTube knows to share this information with more people. So as I mentioned, in today's video, we're going to be doing a detailed explanation of the lawful source of funds requirement of the EB5 visa. This is a requirement that many people have questions about, and it's such an important requirement that it warrants its own video. So with that intro, let's get started. As a quick overview, I want to explain the EB5 visa. The EB5 visa is an investor visa, where somebody can qualify for a green card based on making an investment in a US business and creating jobs for US workers. So the equation is basically invest in a US business, create jobs for US workers, and you can get a green card for yourself, your spouse, and your unmarried children that are under 21 years old. Now, moving on to the topic of today's video regarding the source of funds. So one of the requirements of the EB5 investor visa is that the funds that you use to invest must come from a lawful source. So the reason for this is that USCIS and the immigration policies and laws want to make sure that you are not investing funds that have been obtained through illegal activity, criminal activity, that you're not using funds that have been derived through money laundering or any sort of impermissible activities. USCIS wants to make sure that the funds that you're using to invest and make your EB5 investment are coming from a lawful source, from some sort of lawful earnings of some kind, which we'll go over shortly in this video. So that's a big picture overview of the EB5 lawful source of funds requirement. Now that we have that general background information, let's answer an important question. What are some examples of lawful sources of funds? Well, the answer is that there are many sources of funds that could potentially qualify for an EB5 visa. Let's just go over a few. One very common source of funds is lawful employment earnings. So let's say that you work for a number of years and you save up the funds that you use to make your EB5 investment. That saved income from lawful employment or from operating your own lawful business can be the basis of your source of funds that's used for your EB5 investment. Another common example is proceeds from the sale of a property. So let's say you own a piece of real estate and you sell that piece of real estate. The funds that you receive from the sale of that real estate can be used as the basis of your EB5 investment. Another example is if you are gifted the funds or if you inherit the funds. So let's say that your parent or your rich uncle gifts you the investment funds that you use for your EB5 investment. That can also be the basis of a valid source of funds used for your EB5 investment. And another potentially viable source of funds is a loan. So if you're able to get a loan, that could potentially also qualify as a valid source of funds for EB5 purposes. So now that we've gone over some examples of some sources of funds that can qualify, let's answer a question that a lot of people don't know about. And the question is, what is the difference between the source of funds and the path of funds? Now, a lot of people don't know this, but there's in fact two separate requirements within the EB5 source of funds requirement. USCIS wants to see the source of the funds, which is where the funds came from, and USCIS also wants to see the path of the funds. The path of the funds is essentially, for lack of a better term, the path that the funds take from the source all the way until they are invested into the EB5 business. That's referred to as the path of funds. Now keep in mind that to qualify for an EB5 visa, you have to adequately show the source of the funds and the path of the funds, the path that the funds took. So now let's move on and answer another very important question that oftentimes gets asked by prospective EB5 investors. And the question is, how do I prove lawful source of funds and path of funds? Well, the answer is that the way that you will demonstrate lawful source of funds and path of funds will be very dependent on your specific circumstances. Where did your funds come from? What path did your funds take from the time that they were derived until the time that they made their way into the EB5 New Commercial Enterprise operating account? Your specific circumstances and your specific situation will dictate the appropriate documentation and the appropriate way that your source of funds and path of funds are diagrammed. Now, let me start off by saying that your attorney will play a very critical role in demonstrating source of funds and path of funds. For source of funds, your attorney will oftentimes prepare a detailed memorandum explaining specifically where each source of funds came. It could be that you have $100,000 that came from one source and $250,000 that came from another source and another $50,000 that came from another source. Each of these different sources has to be clearly explained so that the USCIS officer that's reviewing your case can easily identify and follow along with what's going on with your source of funds. Now, regarding path of funds, your immigration attorney will likely also prepare a diagram illustrating the path that the funds took from the time that they were derived until the time that they made their way to the New Commercial Enterprises operating account or escrow account. And again, the purpose of this diagram is to clearly illustrate and make it easy for the USCIS officer to understand the path that the funds took from the time that they were derived until the time that they made their way to the EB5 New Commercial Enterprise. Now, as an EB5 investor, you might be wondering, what documents do I have to provide to prove lawful source of funds? I know that my attorney is going to do the bulk of the work of demonstrating lawful source of funds, but what documents do I need to provide to show where the funds came from? Well, the answer is that the documents needed will depend on what you are claiming as your source of funds. For example, if you're claiming that the funds came from the sale of a property, then you will likely need to show the purchase and sale agreement of the property, along with your bank statement showing the transfer of the funds from the buyer to the seller. If you're proving that your lawful source of funds came from a gift from a friend or a family member, then you will likely have to provide a signed gift declaration that's signed by the giftor, explaining that they're giving you a gift in that amount, along with an explanation on how they obtained the funds that they are using to gift to you. Just because you're getting a gift from another person doesn't mean that that person doesn't have to explain and prove how they obtained their funds. So let's say again, if you're getting a gift from another person, the person that's making that gift has to prove how they obtained the funds lawfully, whether it be through employment earnings or sale of a property, etc. And as another example, let's say you're claiming your lawful source of funds to come from employment earnings. Then you would likely use tax returns along with a signed declaration to demonstrate that you earned the funds through lawful employment. And your particular situation will determine how many years of tax returns you'll have to provide to USCIS. For example, somebody that makes $1 million a year in annual salary doesn't necessarily have to provide as many years of tax returns to demonstrate how they compiled the $500,000 needed for their EB5 investment. Whereas somebody that's making $100,000 a year or $150,000 a year may have to provide more years of tax returns to demonstrate how they were able to compile the $500,000 or the $1 million that's needed for their EB5 investment. Now, I know that this is a lot of information, but I want you to know that the purpose of this is just to give you a rough idea of the types of documents that you'll need to provide. Please know that if you're working with a qualified immigration lawyer, they will outline specifically what documents you need, and that should hopefully make the process much easier for you. And again, just to reiterate, the documents that I specified are not an exhaustive list. Those are just some of the documents that are required. In reality, depending on your particular situation, there will likely be many more documents required to sufficiently prove lawful source of funds and path of funds. So there you have it. I know we went over a lot of information in this video, but just to quickly summarize, we gave a brief overview on the EB5 visa. We talked about specifically what the EB5 source of funds requirement is. We gave some examples of different sources of funds that could potentially qualify for the EB5 requirement. We also talked about the difference between the EB5 source of funds requirement versus the path of funds requirement. And lastly, we explained how to go about proving lawful source of funds and the steps that an immigration lawyer will take to prove lawful source of funds, and the types of documents that you should be prepared to provide to prove lawful source of funds. I hope you found this information extremely helpful. Again, if you like this video, please make sure to give this video a thumbs up so that YouTube knows to share this information with more people. If you know anybody that can benefit from this information, please make sure to share this video with them. As always, thank you so much for tuning in and watching this video, and I will see you on the next one.